As we continued to walk down that stretch of tarmac, Marcus began to tell us the story. Back in the 50s, this floating city was bustling with energy. It was just like any other city, full of people of all ages. There were shops, stores, boutiques, restaurants, schools, even a city hall. There were places you could camp at, places you could swim. It was just like any other ordinary city. However, that blissful feeling could only last for so long. What started as a beautiful place to live soon became full of fear for their children as little boys started to disappear. Between the ages of 6 and 12, one by one, children started to disappear over the course of 5 years. The only reason any of them would be found is if they found the bodies of these poor kids lost in the dumpster or by the side of the road or at the bottom of a mountain. Nobody knew who was behind all of this for a very long time, until one day the mystery serial kidnapper was exposed through a mistake he made. This man was Lawrence Hutchinson, and he was a grade school teacher at the most prominent school in the city. It was found out through many months, years of investigation that he would choose some of the children he taught as his victims. At first, he would befriend them, make sure that they knew that they were doing a very good job in their classes that he taught. However, he would start to get a little too friendly, start to follow them home, and just like any other parent would, the parents of these children would be concerned. But by then it would be too late, as there would always become a day where that child will go to school and never be seen again. My sister Anna, while we walk, interrupted him and asked Marcus what happened, and why would this man be so terrible as to take little children that he taught. It's his job to lead these kids to become great people, right? Marcus smiled and said, of course, that is every teacher's job. But that does not mean that every teacher will live up to that standard. So, what happened? He asked. Well, once these children were in his control and power, he would do terrible things to them. As they were great performers in class, he would make sure that they would do nothing but perform, play with him. He would first break them mentally, showing them that they will never leave, and slowly, inch by inch and limb by limb, he would find a way to sew these children into stuffed animal skins. There was no telling as to how he got a hold of these, but it was assumed that he had a close friend who worked at a toy store who would always give him those giant stuffed bears that people love to buy for their loved ones or little children if they wanted a friend to sleep with for comfort or to play with as a best friend in imaginary games. Lawrence, on the other hand, would take these and use them for his own twisted games. And once these children were essentially stuffed into these bears, he would wait a little bit before sewing the head of these bears onto them and force the children to play as his own personal best friends. Unfortunately, because of how they were treated and captive in their little suits, these children would only last for so long before they died from suffocation or lack of nutrition. And what made him, Lawrence, so disgusting is that after one of the children would pass away, he would discard him in an unknown location, in a dumpster hidden somewhere, or, like I said, toss them over the mountain as if he were nothing, the child, but a toy, like he grew out of them. My sister, Anna, was horrified and upset. Of course, anybody would be after being told such a horrible story. Marcus understood my sister's visible, upset visage, and he smiled and said, "Oh, but don't worry. After 5 years of this terrible man's reign of terror over the city, he was caught. One day he got upset and tried to grab one of the children off of the street because he would not follow him for any extracurricular activities. When he grabbed the child screamed so loud that everybody in the lot could hear him. So, once taken into custody, Lawrence was prodded and was interrogated for hours. And while he was doing so, other investigators went to his house, went to his office, and found out his horrible secret. He was sentenced to death through lethal injection. And while everybody cheered and were finally relieved to know that the killer was caught and tried and executed as everyone wished him to be, the city never truly was able to recover from such a tragic history. And so, after 20 years of attempted healing and recovering, the city decided that it was time to move to a place similar to this floating city, but one that was without such a terrible past. The leaders spent time in finding new places above the clouds where it was safe to live, away from this terrible place. And that is why there are now smaller cities above this one. Those who live up there, he says, are those who survived this horrible, tragic story. Those who don't want to relive it. And so they moved upwards and onwards, never to relive such a terrible past. We had made it to the gate by the time Marcus was done with the story, and my sister and I were absolutely shocked to hear what had happened. After a few moments, I find the courage to speak. I find my voice and I say, "That's terrible, of course. But what does that have to do with us? Why do we need to know this information?" And Marcus smiles at me and says, "I was hoping you were going to ask that. You remember that you are meant to come and play another game to win an even better prize than even coming to such an incredible place to begin with. You see, we are capable of reliving pasts in a way that can seem real, but it is just a simulation. I and my team have created, or recreated rather, this series of events. You and your sister are going to find the school in which the man Lawrence took all of his victims and hid them while he was playing his terrible games. You two are going to find these children, or rather, the spirits of these children. You are going to rescue them and bring them out of the school building without getting caught by Lawrence. In each level, you two are going to find them and take them out. And after each level, you will win, or well, your final prize will get greater and greater. However, it is not a simple game of hide and seek. Lawrence will find you, and he will try to stop you. But don't worry, if you ever come across him and he tries to hurt you, you won't feel anything. It's just a game after all. After each level, the amount of children you must find will be larger and larger, and the difficulty, like any other game, will get greater and greater. There are 6 levels in total, and after each level you will be taken to a waiting room of sorts where you can have a snack, get a drink, relax, and maybe get a little prize or two that will help you continue on the next level. And once all 6 levels are completed, you and your sister will win the ultimate prize. Of course, my sister asks, "What is this ultimate prize you speak of? We've only heard a little bit of what we won this first time around. So what is it now?" Marcus only laughs and says, "Now that would spoil the surprise now, wouldn't it?" We're about to respond, but he continues quickly and says, "This game is not timed. However, the longer it takes for you to find and rescue each child, the more agitated, aggressive, and impatient Lawrence will become. So you better move fast. Move swiftly and move with intelligence if you want to beat this man. We will give you hints here and there, and you will be able to hear me over a sound system that we have installed in the building to give you a little bit of guidance in between each level. Now, of course, anybody who wins the first round of contests, those who are able to come here and visit, are always given the option to say no and to turn around. You two have the option to do just that right now. And Marcus, having put his hand at the door of the gate, looks at us and says, "Do you two wish to turn around? There's no hard feelings if you choose to go home." Anna and I look at each other and we shrug and say, "If there really are children in trouble, real or not, we want to help." And with a smile, Marcus says, "I was hoping you would say that." And he pulls the door, the handle to the gate, and it opens up. He looks at us as we stare into the city, the empty streets. It's almost eerie, creepy. He looks at us and smiles and says, "After you." And although hesitant, my sister and I take the first few steps into the floating, haunted city. The man, Marcus, walks behind us and tells us a little bit more about the city in general. How, while it was a bustling city, there were celebrities that would come here to visit. And those who were considered celebrities up here in the city would go down to, as they would call it, the main ground, to film and to record great events, to be representatives for a mysterious place that only the elite, as they would say, can visit. And once we reach the giant school building, the man stops and says, "This is where the game will take place. You two will be on your own from now on." We look at him in surprise and say, "But where are you going to be?" He shrugs and says, "I'll be around, don't you worry. If it ever becomes too much, you can always call out and say enough. The game will stop, and you will take home whatever prizes you have won and return home. No problems whatsoever. I hope you do not, however, choose to quit," he says, "as nobody else has made it all the way through the 6 levels before. You two are different, and I really hope to see you succeed in this little game." He grins at us, and after we open the school door and walk inside, we turn around to say goodbye and we'll see him later, but he's already gone. Anna looks at me, and I look at her and say, "Well, it seems like we are in for one hell of a game." A few minutes go by, and we are able to just walk around the first floor of the building. What used to be a bright, great school is now decrepit creepy, eerie. The wallpaper is crumbling and tearing off. Any posters or stickers that were once hanging up are now torn to shreds and unrecognizable. Newspapers and leaves scattered the ground. There was glass from windows that had shattered, and the air almost had a blue, unsettling feeling about it. Suddenly, we hear the voice of Marcus coming through what sounded like a PA system in a school. He says, "Welcome to your first level, game players. You only have to find one child in this round, and this is going to be the easiest round of all. Find the child, rescue him, and bring him to the entrance of the school. There you will free him and his soul from the terrible grasp of Lawrence." Anna looks around and asks, "Is he going to be here? Is Lawrence going to be around the school?" Marcus only chuckles and says, "That would give it away now, won't it? I'll give you hints here and there, but I would suggest you always assume that he will show up at any time." He almost has a sinister chuckle after that, and we hear the PA system cut off. I look at my sister and say, "Well, I guess we have no other choice but to start searching." My sister agrees, and we begin to walk from room to room, one by one, until we circle the entire first floor. We were searching for any hints, any signs of a child being held there. We could not call out for fear that Lawrence was hiding in the shadows, waiting for a scream. So unfortunately, after finishing a complete sweep of the first floor, we had no luck. Anna and I made note that we found some odd things in some of the rooms. As while this was a school building, there were some things, furniture items and random pieces of clothing or just items in general lied about across different rooms. We found newspapers, syringes, even medical tools and a few hospital beds. It was very odd, and we both agreed that this couldn't have been here for the school. Either A, Lawrence brought it with him and placed them in these rooms to, well, perform the transformation procedures, or two, they were brought in an attempt to turn the school into a medical facility. Of course, neither worked out, and so it was left here to rot, to be abandoned. Anna and I decided that we should check the basement, and after hearing what sounded like a little whimper, we quickly but carefully hurried down the staircase, and after walking A little ways down a dark hallway in the basement, there's a doorway that leads to a large boiler room. At the far end of the room, there was a radiator, and chained to that radiator was a poor, terrified 7-year-old boy. He was crying, shaking, and he looked like he almost had a bruise on his face. Of course, Anna and I were worried, but we were also excited because this is the first child that we get to rescue. However, we hear another voice behind us. It was far enough away for it to be revealed that the person was not exactly close, but we could still hear it, the whistling. It was Lawrence, and after hearing the whistles, the little boy started to cry and try and shake himself free from the handcuffs that kept him stuck to the radiator. Immediately, Anna and I hid in the corner of the room, where the door leading to the boiler room would keep us hidden from the sights of the terrible, terrible man. Lawrence walks forward, entering the room as he sees the child, and he smiles. We hear him chuckle, and he says to the child, "Do not fear. The pain will be over soon, and then we can play forever and ever. Remember that's what you said one day, right? After playing firefighter and policeman, you said you wished that we could play forever. And well, now you'll be able to live that dream. We will play for forever and ever." The man was carrying a box in his hand which looked like it held some surgical equipment. This caused the child to scream and cry again, and his loud noises gave Anna and myself some time to grab what looked like a 2x4 plank of wood that was just lying on the floor. Anna was the one to point it out to me, and after a nod, I creep up, grab the board, and after walking as close as I could behind the man named Lawrence without being noticed, I swung the board as hard as I could, hitting him at the side of the head. This caused Lawrence to crumple and fall on the floor, unconscious. I dropped the board, knowing that he would be out for a little while, and I used that time to search his pockets for any keys that might release the child. I was lucky this time because, lo and behold, there was a key in his pocket, a singular key, one that obviously was meant for the handcuffs. My sister Anna was already over by the child, hugging him, comforting him, telling him that we were going to get him out. I uncuffed the child. He was shaking. He was so scared. But we took him by the hands. We do our best to quickly and quietly lead the child up the stairs to safety. But halfway up the stairs we hear a groan and then a growl. and then a yell of anger. This caused the little boy to tremble so badly that he could no longer walk. He was paralyzed with fear, as all of us knew that Lawrence was awake. I look at Anna, who nods and picks up the child, and she starts to run as fast as she can up the stairs while carrying him. I take up the rear just to be safe, because I'm not carrying anything, I can be the one to defend us if necessary. Fortunately for us, though, the front doors to the school building were really close by, and before the man could even make it up the entire flight of stairs, we had already reached the front door, and swinging it open as fast as we could, we run out, and the child was rescued. The poor thing was crying still, not really realizing what had happened. And it took us a minute, but Anna and I were able to help him realize that he is now safe. Nothing can hurt him anymore, and it is time for him to go forward, to move on and be peaceful. The little one, tearful but grateful, gives us both a hug, and with a few moments saying goodbye, he disappears. We re-enter the school building, fully prepared to face the man who had kidnapped the child. But instead, we are met with what looked like a floating door within the building. This door was preceded by floating rocks, almost, platforms that we had to jump across in order to get to the door. As soon as we do so, my sister and I look at each other. While we were a little confused, we're still very interested to see what would happen. We open the door and walk into what feels like a giant but relaxing waiting room. The walls were a nice, comfortable, cream, yellow, white color. The floor was cool under our feet and everything was clean. There was a couch where we could sit, a chair, and some books on a shelf. Across the way from that was a table of snacks, treats, and even a chocolate fountain. As we were taking the sights in, Marcus comes across a PA system once again, and he says congratulations for winning and passing the first level of this game. Our viewers will be very excited to see just how well you two work together. Sisters can be against each other, or they can team up and be some of the most unstoppable forces in the world. And it is good to see that you two are the latter. This place is a place where you can relax, to rest up, and to celebrate your little victory. You can help yourself to any drinks or snacks or treats that are in this room. And when you're ready, you may proceed through the next door on the left, the one that is red, and continue on to the next level of the game. My sister Anna asks, "Is there a time limit?" And he laughs and says no, You can actually have a nap here if you want, as long as you remember that the game will continue once you leave this room. And before he completely signs off, Marcus adds, "Oh, and by the way, there's also a board on the wall. On it, you'll see various tools and weapons, from a small pocket knife and a dagger to a crossbow and even a long whip. These items are meant to help you continue the game. As each level passes, you are granted one gift, one tool that you can use as a means of defense or assistance in traps or rescuing a child. That little boy that you saved, his name was David. He was one of the youngest and most terrified. You did a great job saving him, so you have the ability to choose one of these weapons or items of any choice to take with you on the next level. Enjoy your treats, ladies, and we will see you on the other side." The PA system cuts out, and a very calming type of music starts to play. My sister and I are both pretty sweaty and warm from the sudden rush of adrenaline and the run that we had to go up the stairs. So, of course, we're hungry. And of course, we're very thirsty. However, just as we're about to grab a snack and a drink, we hear another voice come over the PA system. It's a voice of a young man, a new one. And he says, "Do not touch any of the food. Do not drink or eat from the table. It is not safe, and nor will it help you in your strength to continue these games." The voice was almost sweet, but even more concerning than the stories that we had already heard. It was a warning from a stranger, and Anna and I were very confused. At first, my sister asked, "Do you think it's someone trying to mess with us?" But before I could answer, the young man's voice comes out again and says, "Please, listen to me. There's something not right going on in the city. I know of the history, and it breaks my heart to see that these little children have been doomed to relive the past as ghosts while being constantly tormented by their captor. However, you two are in even greater danger. Beware of the man named Marcus. He is not to be trusted." Of course, I ask, "Who are you? How do you know this? And why should we trust you?" The young man begins to respond, saying that he has been watching this whole time, that he has never been able to save anybody before from this trap, but he intends to do his best from now on to help us. In front of us, a set of pills appear, one for each of us. Both seem to have an odd glow about it, and he says to take these pills. Of course, Anna and I are both skeptical, but he says that they will help us in the next levels of the game. There will be traps, he says, traps that Marcus will keep hidden from you in hopes that you won't notice and get stuck, eventually caught, and then defeated by the man called Lawrence. These pills will give you the ability to see these traps and to avoid them or disarm them completely. Trust me, please, he says, and I will do my best to find a way to get you out of this game and into a safe place where I can truly explain everything to you. Of course, we're about to ask more questions, but then we hear another buzz, a feedback coming from the intercom. From the PA system, we then hear Marcus say, "Did you hear that?" It sounded like another voice for a moment. Then he chuckles and says, "Never mind it. It's just one of my staff members trying to be funny. He likes to try and scare people sometimes. But I assure you, you are completely safe. So please enjoy your food, your drinks, and when you are ready, enter through the door." Anna and I are left with our thoughts for a moment, and we look at the pills and then at each other. Anna asks, "Do you think he's telling the truth, the mystery man?" I sigh and shrug and say, "I don't know. Everything is a little crazy. But if this man, Marcus, is to not be trusted, I can understand why one would say that. He has a sort of uneasy air about him. I don't know how I feel about it. I just know that it makes me feel a little weird, uneasy." Anna nods and says, "I agree. But for now, let's play his game and see what happens next." "Will you take the pill?" she asks me. I look at it, and I think for a moment before nodding, and I say yes. I think so. If it helps, and if he's telling the truth about Marcus, we will need all the help we can get. Anna nods, and we both take that pill, the medicine given to us, together. Suddenly, we feel a little warm, as if somebody brushed a warm cloth of hot water across our forehead, and we see something glowing in front of us. What was it? It looked like a camera, and a small one that would be naked to the human eye. But for us, it was a large, blinking, golden dot against the wall. Immediately, my sister and I decided that we should not stay in that waiting room for much longer, and so we hurry over to the wall of the weapons. I choose a large knife, a switchblade, whereas my sister chooses a Swiss Army knife. She's always loved them when she was younger and still keeps some to this day. She looks at it and looks at me and says, "These things are all-purpose, baby. You never know when you need them." I, of course, have to chuckle, and after making sure that my weapon felt comfortable in my hands, we look at each other, nod, and say, whatever happens, we're doing this together. And we open the red door and step into the next room to face the next level of the game. The next trial, to see what will happen next.